Night shifts at St. Mercy Hospital were usually quiet, but the silence that night felt heavier than usual. The long corridors stretched under pale fluorescent lights that flickered occasionally, casting restless shadows against the sterile walls. Outside, a thick winter fog wrapped around the small town and pressed against the hospital windows like a living thing watching from the darkness. Alina had worked the night shift for several years and was used to the slow rhythm of midnight hours. The quiet normally comforted her, allowing her to move calmly between rooms while machines hummed steadily in the background. Yet something about that night felt wrong, as if the building itself were holding its breath. The East Wing housed the hospital's most fragile patients, many of them elderly or critically ill. Alina walked slowly down the corridor with her clipboard, checking monitors and adjusting blankets while the steady beeping of heart machines echoed through the halls. Every room carried the familiar smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint scent of aging medicine. One of the patients, an old man suffering from severe heart failure, slept quietly beneath the pale hospital light. His breathing was shallow but steady, and his monitors showed weak but stable signs of life. Alina carefully adjusted his blanket and glanced at the clock mounted on the wall above the door. The minute hand was creeping toward midnight with a strange, deliberate slowness. For reasons she could not explain, Alina lingered beside the bed instead of leaving the room. The air around her suddenly felt colder, prickling against her skin like invisible needles. When the clock struck 12, the monitor suddenly released a long, flat mechanical tone. The green line that had once pulsed steadily now stretched across the screen without movement. Elena's heart jumped into her throat as she called for assistance. Doctors rushed into the room within moments, their movements fast but strangely quiet. They worked quickly with practiced urgency, but Alina could already see the stillness settling over the old man's body. Within minutes, the doctors stepped away, leaving behind the silent confirmation that the patient had died. Alina tried to push the uneasiness aside as the staff covered the body and prepared the paperwork. Death was common in hospitals, and she had witnessed many during her years working nights. Still, something about the exact timing of midnight stayed in her thoughts longer than it should have. The following night passed quietly until the same hour arrived again. Lena was walking past another patient's room when a monitor suddenly screamed through the hallway. The sound sliced through the silence with terrifying sharpness. She rushed inside to find another patient lying motionless in the bed. The monitor showed the same unmoving line she had seen the night before. When Alina looked at the wall clock, the time read exactly 12. By the third night, the pattern had begun to disturb her deeply. Once again, the hospital corridors were silent, and once again a patient in the East Wing died the moment midnight arrived. The repetition felt too precise and too deliberate to be coincidence. Rumors slowly began spreading among the night staff. Some nurses whispered about cursed rooms, while others blamed failing equipment or bad luck. Lena listened but said little, unable to shake the strange feeling growing inside her. Late on the fourth night, while walking through the dim corridor, Alina noticed something unusual near the far end of the hallway. A tall figure stood motionless beside one of the patient doors, barely visible under the flickering ceiling lights. At first she assumed it was another staff member standing watch. Yet the figure did not move, shift, or react to her approaching footsteps. Its outline appeared unnaturally tall and thin, and something about its shape seemed wrong in a way Alina could not explain. A cold sensation crept down her spine as she slowed her steps. She stared at the strange silhouette, while the ticking of the hallway clock echoed loudly around her. The moment the clock struck midnight again, a monitor alarm suddenly screamed from the nearby room. Lena turned instinctively and rushed inside. Another patient lay lifeless on the bed as the machine wailed beside them. Panic surged through her as she called for help, her hands trembling as doctors once again hurried into the room. The familiar routine unfolded quickly, ending with the same quiet declaration of death. When Alina stepped back into the corridor seconds later, the tall figure was gone. The hallway stood completely empty under the flickering lights. Only the distant ticking of the clock remained, marking the passing seconds of another midnight. The strange deaths in the East Wing slowly became an unspoken weight among the night staff. No one officially questioned the pattern, yet every nurse quietly checked the clock as midnight approached. Lena felt the tension most strongly, because the image of that silent figure refused to leave her mind. She tried convincing herself that exhaustion had created the illusion. Long shifts and dim lighting could easily trick the mind into seeing things that were not truly there. Still, the memory of that tall shape standing in the corridor remained disturbingly clear. The nurses whispered more openly as the nights passed. Each new death seemed to arrive with the same eerie precision. Alina began to feel that midnight was not simply a time but the arrival of something unseen. One foggy night, she saw the figure again, stood at the far end of the corridor beside another patient's door. The pale hospital lights revealed a shape that looked disturbingly human, yet terribly wrong. Large folded wings rested against its back like shadows carved from bone. The temperature in the hallway dropped sharply. Alina felt the air grow heavy while the seconds crept toward midnight. Her heart pounded as she forced herself to watch the motionless presence.
Ow.
The moment the clock struck 12, another monitor screamed through the silence. Alina rushed into the patient's room where doctors soon confirmed another death. When she stepped back into the hallway again, the winged figure still stood there. For the first time, she saw its face clearly. Its skin looked pale and lifeless, while hollow eyes reflected the dim hospital light. Those eyes seemed ancient and empty, carrying no anger and no compassion. Alina realized with a wave of terror that the creature had been aware of her all along. Sleep became difficult after that night. Every time Alina closed her eyes, she saw the creature standing silently in the corridor. The hospital itself began to feel older, as if its walls carried forgotten secrets buried beneath years of quiet suffering. Curiosity slowly grew stronger than her fear. She began searching through the hospital archives located in the dusty basement. Old records and yellowed newspapers described a deadly epidemic that had swept through the hospital decades earlier. Many patients had died in a section of the building that was later sealed and abandoned. The most disturbing detail appeared in the recorded times of death. Many of those patients had also died close to midnight. One faded newspaper clipping described terrified nurses who claimed to see a tall winged figure wandering the hospital halls during the outbreak. Witnesses believed the figure appeared beside patients moments before they died. The article dismissed the story as fear and superstition. The discovery led Alina to a hidden service door at the end of the East Wing corridor. When she opened it, a cold draft drifted from a dark abandoned hallway beyond. Dust filled the air as she stepped into the forgotten wing. Rusting bed frames and torn curtains remained where they had been left decades earlier. The silence in the corridor felt like a grave sealed beneath the hospital. Alina felt an unsettling certainty that something had been waiting there for a very long time. Then she heard the soft rustling of movement behind her. At the far end of the corridor stood the tall winged figure again. Its pale shape seemed darker than the shadows around it. The creature began moving toward her with slow, silent steps. The distant hospital clock began striking midnight above them. With every echo of the chime, the creature came closer. Its wings unfolded slightly, brushing against the cracked walls with a dry whisper. Alina's heart pounded violently as fear froze her in place. When the final chime faded, the creature stood only a few steps away. Its hollow eyes locked onto hers, while the cold air thickened around them. Alina felt a strange pressure filling her thoughts like a silent voice forming inside her mind. The presence did not speak with words, yet its meaning arrived clearly. It was not the cause of death. It simply arrived when death had already come. Visions flooded Alina's mind of countless hospital rooms across decades. In each one, the same winged figure stood silently beside dying patients. It never touched them and never interfered with their final moments. The creature only appeared when the end was certain. A deeper terror slowly formed inside Alina's heart. If the being only appeared when someone's final moment had arrived, then there was only one reason it had revealed itself to her. The realization felt like ice spreading through her veins. She was not meant to discover it. She was meant to meet it. Another wave of silent understanding moved through her thoughts. Alina saw an image of the hospital corridor with the large clock pointing to midnight. In the vision, she stood alone while the winged figure approached from the shadows. The creature slowly folded its wings as the vision faded. The silent message was unmistakable. The next time the clock struck midnight, it would be standing beside her. Alina returned to the active hospital halls with trembling hands and a heart filled with dread. The building looked normal, yet every ticking second felt heavier than the last. Midnight was approaching again. She tried to ignore the vision, convincing herself it was only fear twisting her imagination. Still, the sound of the hallway clock echoed constantly in her mind. The hours crawled forward with painful slowness. By late evening, the familiar fog had returned outside the hospital windows. Inside the East Wing, the quiet deepened as most patients drifted into sleep. Lena stood alone in the corridor watching the clock. Lena said 11:45. Panic began creeping into her thoughts. She suddenly felt the desperate urge to leave the hospital before midnight arrived. The idea of escaping filled her mind with fragile hope. She grabbed her coat and hurried toward the exit. But as she reached the stairwell door, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The lights above flickered while a crushing heaviness settled over her chest. Her legs refused to move forward, as though the building itself was holding her in place. Lena slowly sank against the wall while the clock continued ticking. The hallway grew colder. Then she heard the familiar rustling of feathers behind her. The clock struck midnight. The echo of the chime rolled through the silent corridor as Elena closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the angel of death stood quietly beside her. Its pale wings stretched along the walls while its hollow eyes watched without emotion. Her breathing slowed until the world felt distant and quiet. The final chime faded into silence as Elena's body became still against the wall. The next morning, hospital staff discovered her lying peacefully in the East Wing corridor. Doctors could find no clear explanation for the sudden death of a healthy young nurse. The official report listed it as an unexplained cardiac failure. But sometimes when midnight approaches and the corridors fall silent, a few nurses claim they see a tall shadow standing beside the beds of the dying. And the angel of death continues its quiet vigil inside St. Mercy Hospital.